Good morning, boys and girls. It is so good to be with you today. Some of you will recognise me, but I think that some of you have just turned round to your mum or dad and said, "Who's that man?" So for those that don't know me, my name's Stephen and I am Joel and Isla and Noah and Ben's uncle. And today I have 3 helpers with me. I have Sarah.
Good morning.
I have Bethany.
Hello.
And behind the camera, I've got Kezia.
Hi.
And Sarah and Bethany and Kezia are 3 of Joel and Isla and Noah and Ben's cousins. We want to say thank you so much for letting us join you at church over the past few weeks. We've really enjoyed being with you. This morning we'd like to tell you a story. It's a story in the Bible and it's one of my favourite stories in the whole Bible. It's a really short story, but it's a brilliant story. And there are 4 people in the story. Here's the first one. And the first one is a lady who has a baby in her tummy. And I think some of you might have had the opportunity to play this lady in a nativity, because her name is Mary. And the baby in her tummy is a little boy, and his name is Jesus. So Mary has a baby in her tummy. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about mums who have babies in their tummies, because something that mums like to do when they've got a baby in their tummy is meet other mums who also have babies in their tummies. And lots of mums with babies in their tummies sit round and they have a cup of tea and they love to chat about what it's like having a baby in their tummy. And they chat about all sorts of things. They chat about whether they think their baby will be a boy or whether their baby will be a girl. And Mary already knew that her baby was going to be a boy. Sometimes they chat about how many times the baby kicked them in the middle of the night when they were trying to sleep. And the thing that mums really like talking about the most when they have a baby in their tummy is the funny foods that they feel like eating. And when mums have babies in their tummies, they eat all sorts of foods that you wouldn't normally eat. And sometimes a mum might say something like, "Ever since I've had this baby in my tummy, I've really liked baked potatoes with Cocoa Pops on the top." Does that sound nice? And another mum might say, "Well, I don't really like baked potatoes with Cocoa Pops on the top, but I like Mars bars with tuna fish." Does that sound nice?
Nope.
Mums talk about these funny kinds of things when they've got babies in their tummies. And there's a lady in your church called Melanie, and I'm sure lots of you know her. And Melanie's job is to look after mums who have babies in their tummies. And she must have to listen to this stuff all day, every day. I don't know how she does it. Anyway, good news for Mary is that Mary had a cousin called Elizabeth. And guess what? Elizabeth also had a baby in her tummy. And Elizabeth's baby was called John. She was also going to have a boy. And we sometimes call this baby John the Baptist, but his mum and dad didn't call him John the Baptist. His mum and dad called him John. So Mary has a baby in her tummy called Jesus, and Elizabeth has a baby in her tummy called John. And this is great news for them because they can meet up and chat about what it's like having a baby in their tummy. And that's what they did. That's the story we're going to talk about today. Because one day, Mary decided to go and visit Elizabeth. And she was able to do that. They couldn't phone each other, and they couldn't email each other, and they couldn't text each other. And because there was no coronavirus in those days, they were allowed to go and meet each other. And Mary went to visit Elizabeth. And Kezia is going to read what happened when Mary shouted "hello" to Elizabeth. and it's in Luke chapter 1, verse 41.
When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit.
And then Elizabeth shouted something to Mary, which is in verse 44.
As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leapt for joy.
That's the story. I told you it was a really short story. So what happened is Mary went to visit Elizabeth, and when Mary shouted hello, the baby in Elizabeth's tummy jumped. It jumped. Shall we do that, girls? When Mary shouted hello,
Hello!
the baby jumped in Elizabeth's tummy. And you might be thinking, Stephen, you said that was one of your favourite stories in the whole Bible. Why is that one of your favourite stories in the whole Bible? And I want to tell you why I love this story so much. Girls, can you take the babies out of your tummy? There we go. Because there are 4 people in the story. There's not 2 people. There's not Mary and Elizabeth. There's 4 people. There's Mary and Elizabeth, and there's Jesus, and there's John. And what happens in this story is that Mary and Elizabeth are looking at one another. And when Mary shouts hello,
Hello!
Elizabeth hears Mary, and Elizabeth sees Mary, and Elizabeth gets excited about getting to see her cousin and chatting all about what it's like having a baby in their tummy. But John sees Jesus. The mums are looking at one another, but the babies are looking at one another. And when Mary comes in to Elizabeth's house, John sees Jesus. He's aware of Jesus. And think how little he is. He's not at primary school. He's not a toddler. He's not even a newborn baby. He is so small and so tiny that he's not even been born yet. And still, he recognizes when Jesus is there. He recognizes when God's in the room. He recognizes when he is in the presence of Jesus. That is amazing. And what that story says to me is, it doesn't matter how young you are. It doesn't matter how little you are. You don't need to be an adult. You don't need to be a teenager. You don't even need to be at primary school. You are never, ever, ever, ever too small or too young to recognize Jesus' presence. It's amazing. So no matter how big or how little you are today, you can recognize God's presence. You can feel when God's there. You can feel when God's moving. It's absolutely brilliant. And for me as a dad, and for all the mums and dads that are listening to me talking just now, that's amazing for us. That is brilliant for us. We can pray for our children that they will recognize the presence of God even though they are really, really young. That they'll recognize the presence of God, that they'll know when God's moving, that they'll be able to sense when God's in the room, that they'll be able to be led by God even when they are really, really, really small. It's an amazing story. Mary and Elizabeth went to meet each other, and John recognized that he was in the presence of Jesus, even though he was tiny. Cool story, eh? Mm-hmm. Cool story. So, boys and girls, what I'd love you to do this week is to ask God to make his presence known to you. That you'll be a boy growing up or you'll be a girl growing up who always recognizes the presence of God. You know when God's saying, do that. You know when God's saying, do this. You know when God's moving. You know what God's asking you to do. That you'll always recognize when you're in the presence of God. And for mums and dads, we can pray that for our children. That they will recognize the presence of God at an age way younger than when we started to recognize the presence of God. And lastly, if you have 5 or 10 minutes this week and you like drawing, then my little challenge for you is to draw a picture of John jumping in his mummy's tummy because he's in the presence of God. And Gavin's about to put up a little picture that I've drawn of John jumping in his mum's tummy, and I'm sure you can do a better picture than the one I've done. Have a brilliant week. God bless you all, and remember, you are never, ever, ever too young or too small to recognise the presence of God. Going to say bye-bye, girls?
Bye.